Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. We are here tonight for the Connection to Water, Integrating Indigenous Perspectives webinar. We are so grateful and thankful for Tasha Beeds, Guerin, and Marilyn Baptiste to be here with us tonight as guest speakers to discuss their perspectives on connecting to water. Before we get started, we have Marilyn, who's going to be providing a welcome for us all. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Paloma. And I'm going to ignore the ringing in my background. Welcome everyone for joining a very important discussion, sharing our knowledge and just sharing from our heart and our mind and our soul. Giving thanks, Jikaida Tandi. Tuning all goody needs in Lisans, but aside and Jikaida Tanti. Giving thanks to our water, our creator, angels, as well as our ancestors. Giving thanks for the lands that we are on, the indigenous lands of Turtle Island, otherwise known as North America. And acknowledging where I am here today in the Snow Mountains, Tsaifot'in territory, otherwise known as the Supreme Court recognized tidal land, and also acknowledging and respecting all of the lands where all of you are sitting today or standing today. I would like to share a drum song with you that I am learning with my people. It is a song from an elder before my time. Secəlenəχວ is about the children of the bluffs are turning into fish and they are joining the fish. A lot of our songs talk about the abundance and giving thanks for the abundance for our people. And I am also learning about this Zoom and virtual drumming and singing, so it's hopefully it won't cut out on you. So Chanakya to our elder before my time, Isabel, from one of our communities in the Chilcotin. And I also want to say thank you to the rain that we are finally receiving. I am so thankful, and our salmon are so very thankful for the rains that come. Our fish, all of our fish species, and just wanting to note that, just giving thanks to our salmon as well as our waters. And I look forward to hearing everyone's presentations. Thank you. Tasha.
Thank you, Marilyn, for that beautiful welcome tonight, and welcome to everyone joining us. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce who we are. Sea Smart. This is the small Vancouver-based charity that Elaine and I are with, and we are an environmental education charity that inspires people to love and protect our ocean and our waterways. We run a lot of youth programs. We have our summer camps that are going on right now. Of course, this past couple years, we've been doing mostly online programs. This was our marine biologist in training virtual camp for girls. We did one for Indigenous girls that was really exciting. We were able to offer that, and programs in person and after school. We also do programs with adults, our corporate programs. We do beach cleanups, we do lunch and learns. And what's really great about these is the funds that we are able to get from these corporate programs, we direct them towards our youth programs, helping drive this forward. We have this Explore the Shore challenge going on right now. This is mostly Vancouver based, but there are 30 challenges that you can do anywhere near a beach, near waterways. And 10 additional Vancouver specific challenges. And this is a way for families, people to spend more time outdoors, spend more time connecting with your local rivers and lakes and beaches. So we're all here tonight for our Connection to Water, Integrating Indigenous Perspectives webinar. And our first guest speaker of the evening is Tasha Beeds. Tasha Beeds is a Cree, Scottish-Metis, and Bajan Indigenous grassroots academic auntie and activist. She is a Mide-Kwe water walker, and Tasha was recently an assistant professor in the Department of Indigenous Studies at the University of Sudbury. She's also the Ron Ianni Fellow at the University of Windsor's Faculty of Law, where she guest lectures for Indigenous Legal Orders Institute. Tasha has walked about 7,000 kilometers as a way to raise awareness about the state of our water systems in Canada and the US. Her first walk in 2011 was around Rice Lake, Ontario, which led to her participation in lengthier journeys, including a walk that involved carrying water from the Atlantic Ocean, beginning in Matane, Quebec, and ending in Madeline Island, Wisconsin. You'll see that Tasha looks like she might be in a bit of a moving vehicle right now. That is because Tasha is currently on her way to a water walk. And I would like to invite you all to give a very warm welcome to Tasha for being here this evening. Thank you so much, Tasha. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. I'm really happy to be able to take the time, and we actually pulled over, so I won't be bobbing in the water. Ani bojo tanse kapimote eskisko nitsukeson neonakon and donchpamakwan do dem nij Mide-Kwe. I just introduced myself in the language of my Cree and Métis ancestors. I hail from the Treaty 6 territories of Guy, Saskatchewan. I'm Plains Cree, and I also acknowledge the ancestors, my Scottish-Metis roots as well. And in addition to my Bajan roots, primarily I was culturally raised with my Cree and Métis family in the Plains area of the Treaty 6 territory. And so that's where I'm situated right now. I'm currently en route to actually do a water walk for the Saskatchewan River. And so we'll be starting either on Saturday or Sunday, and we walk in ceremony for different bodies of water. And that tradition began in 2003 with my late teacher and mentor. She was a grandmother by the name of Josephine Ba Mandaman, or Bidasige Ba. We put the BA as a marker when someone has passed on, just to acknowledge that she's still doing her work over on that other side. And so in 2003, Josephine Ba Bidasageba started her journey, a 14-year tradition of walking around the Great Lakes, and it was to bring awareness about the serious issues of pollution, degradation, and destruction in the planet's largest group of freshwater lakes. She started specifically for the Great Lakes, and she was my teacher and my mentor and my friend. And her call was a call to raise consciousness for the water, right? To see the water not just as a resource, but as the living being and entity, as our ancestors saw those, our respective Indigenous ancestors, recognizing that we all come from very diverse cultural backgrounds, but there are some very common elements. And with that, you know, seeing the water, seeing the earth as living, is something that I think across the globe, we as Indigenous people have that in common. And when you're thinking about the water as a living entity, it's very different. It's a very different relationship, right? Like we're moving in ceremony for that water, on behalf of that water, to show our gratitude. As we move across our ancestral territories, we're singing for that water, we're expressing gratitude, we're noticing all of creation, we're activating, we're activating our ancestors even in that movement through our bodies. And so for many people, when they see us, they'll stop and say, like, what are you doing? Or what is it that you're moving for? And we say, it's always about the water. We when we're water walking, it's not about ourselves. It's not about, how far can I physically go, or I want to see myself on social media or something like that. It's always about the water. The water comes first. And when you start to think about that water as a living entity. And in Anishinaabe and Nehiyaw cultures, the water is conceptualized as a feminine energy, so as a female energy. And so when you think of the water as a she, it you enter into a different kind of relationship with the water than when you think of the water as a resource. Often for many people, water is seen as something, you'll use to drink or to shower with, or in this heat. There's a lot of heat waves, so people are like jumping into the water, as a cool, refreshing kind of enjoyment on a hot summer day. And when you think of, it's always about using the water, right? Whether you're using it to brush your teeth, or using it to wash up, or using it to drink, or using the water to go boating with, or to go even swimming, right? So what we're asking people to do in the water walks is shift your consciousness, and that can be simple as saying thank you to that water, because of course without water none of us would exist, right? So when we're walking, it's about entering into that space of complete gratitude for the water. And we're not just walking, we're walking for the water, but because water is connected to all of life, we're also walking for all of life. So we're walking for the animals, the birds, the two-legged, like even the humans, right? All the animals that use the water, and the beings that are inside the water. We're walking in ceremony for them. We're also walking ahead. We're looking ahead. One of the things the late Josephine Ba always said, is we're supposed to look 7 generations ahead. 7 generations ago, there was an ancestor. Someone was thinking about you, your kokum or your mushum, your grandmother and grandfather, your ancestors were already thinking about you, and they loved you already. And I never fully understood that until I became a grandmother myself. I have 2 grandchildren. And let me tell you, I am looking ahead. I love my great grandbabies already. I don't even need to know them. And my love is so strong for them. So I know 7 generations ago, there was someone like that thinking of me. And it's the same for you. You may not even know who you are or where you come from. It doesn't matter. Your ancestors will know you. It doesn't matter if you were adopted or you don't, you only go back two generations. your ancestors will know you. And so that's what this consciousness is about as well, because the water connects us as people. The water connects us to each other because we're also made up of water. So, we're saying thank you. We're acknowledging that connection we have as human beings to the rest of creation. And it's a really powerful ceremony. Many people underestimate what we're doing. Because it's not just a physical endeavor, it's a physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental. It's a mental journey, right? All of those elements come into play, and we welcome anyone. um, we welcome anyone to join us. The water doesn't discriminate, and so whoever feels moved to walk for that water is welcome to enter into that ceremony with us. We do have protocols that we follow. We lift a copper vessel, and we have an eagle water staff. And so the women are the ones who carry that copper vessel. It's a copper pail, and we lift that water from the headwaters. So for instance, for the Saskatchewan River, the headwaters are starting in between Jasper and Banff at a glacier, actually. And so we think about that, like how much life is moving from that particular center. It's a huge aquifer that the Saskatchewan River is a part of. And so we lift up that water from that starting point, and then we carry that water all along the length of the river. So for us, it'll take us approximately, I'm thinking about 2 months. It's 1,900 kilometers. We don't just stay, we stay on the roadways as well to raise consciousness so people will actually see us. But anybody can join, and so we welcome that. And if you feel moved, you can read up on us in the link tree that leads us to our site. We're completely grassroots. We have no government funding. We have no formal funding. We rely completely on the kindness and generosity of strangers and people who are moved to help us move in this way in ceremony. And so, there's also a serious side to it, because colonization has impacted upon us, right, in so many levels. But no matter how many cities are built, no matter how many fences are put up, our ancestors have walked these lands for thousands of years, right? If you're an Indigenous person, those those ancestors are with you when you step into your own traditional territory after you've been away for a while. And that goes for anybody, Indigenous or non-Indigenous. If you have the privilege of being able to go to the landscape where your ancestors are embodied in, you will feel that connection immediately. As soon as you step foot in that land, as soon as you put your hands inside that water, you will feel the power of your ancestors. And so that's what we also recognize when we're walking in ceremony. Most of us that are walking for the Saskatchewan River are connected ancestrally. We are all Nahiawak or Plains Cree or Woodlands Cree. And so we do have that ancestral linkage. We welcome non-Indigenous people to enter into relationship further, because we are guests. Like, you as non-Indigenous people, you are guests to that territory, and so there is an obligation for you to enter into that relationship with those bodies of water, because that's what your ancestors agreed to do with our ancestors. And so that 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 promise is still there, and it's really important. But we're entering into that depth of that relationship when we're water walking, and we're inviting others to find their own place within that landscape in relation to the water. And so, we carry whatever is happening. And if you know the state of the waters today, right? If you think of us as the women who are we're carrying that life, just as we do for real. Like when we get pregnant, we're carrying life. So that copper vessel represents that life. And whatever is inside that river, in a metaphorical way, we filter through our bodies. So if you can imagine all of the pollution and all of the garbage and all of everything that goes into that water, that's what we're putting into ourselves. And that's one of the most pivotal messages. Take the time, think about what you're putting into the water. Do a little bit of a cleanup next time you're at the water's edge. Sing the water a song, say thank you, right? Express that gratitude in the ways that you know how. So we welcome again any and all kind of support. Anyone can reach out. Our links are in the chat room. Feel free to give us a message. We won't have service in the mountains. I'm told there's actual grizzly bears over there too. So we're like trying to get ready we're trying to be grizzly bear safe. We were told that the site we're camping at, there were 8 grizzly bears seen there. So we're very conscious and we're very careful. But we do have a GPS. So the GPS will be activated. It goes on the copper pail. And so you'll be able to follow us and see exactly where we are, and see when we start
Nice.
that journey. So you could join us at any given point between the Rocky Mountains and Lake Winnipeg. You're more than welcome. If you feel moved to drive down for the day and come and see us, we more than welcome. We more than welcome you.
Thank you,
That,
Tasha.
I'll say thank you again for the time and the energy, and my heart is full. I acknowledge all of you and the ancestors that are with you now as we sit in this Zoom room. They're still with us. So again, thank you. Kinenaskumptin Nawal, Chimi Gwech, and I hope to hear from some of you soon.
Thank you, Tasha. That was so beautiful. I love how you spoke about the gratitude to give back and to acknowledge, and saying how water is a she, and when you use that type of language, that completely shifts your mindset, as you say, and that's actually going to be a takeaway from today for everyone, is trying to use that sort of language in our everyday lives of, instead of thinking of things as objects, as resources for us to use, saying this is somebody, this is a person, the river person, and the tree people, and the way that we speak about Mother Nature, and all
Yeah.
the beings we share this world with.
And for sure, and once you recognize the water, as once you enter into that relationship with her, you're never going to be able to throw something in her again. You'll never drop a cup, you'll never drop a cigarette butt, you'll never put anything in her again, because it would be equivalent to like dumping an ashtray on your auntie, right? We would never do that, right? We would never do that. Or to our nokomis, our grandmother, like we would never throw garbage on our grandmother's lap, right? And so as soon as you make that shift, it changes you. And then you see garbage, you're like, oh my goodness, and you just want to go and you want to pick that up, right? So it really is about that, making that shift, and we can all do it. So thank you again, Paloma, and I can't wait to hear from everyone else. I'll stay connected for as long as I can stay connected. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tasha. We'll have a Q&A at the end where we can, hopefully Tasha will still be with us, and we can answer questions. But if Tasha needs to head off, I'm happy to pass along any questions we have to you too.
Yeah, I'll try to stick it out for as long as I can. As long as I have Wi-Fi, I'll stay. All right.
Thank you, Tasha. So our next speaker tonight is Morgan Guerin. Thank you, Morgan, for joining us. Morgan is a community leader elected as the counselor for the Musqueam Indian Band. Morgan was born on Musqueam territory and raised by his parents and grandparents on the Musqueam Reserve. From a young age, he learned to hunt, to fish, and to recognize the importance of his land. Morgan was an Aboriginal fishery officer, where he saw the impacts of land development on our waterways and ocean, and he's been a strong advocate for land and water protection. Morgan is also an artist with previous exhibitions at the Museum of Vancouver, and he continues to share his knowledge, expertise, and teachings on coastal practices. Please join me in welcoming Morgan tonight. Thank you so much, Morgan, for being here with us.
Thank you, Paloma. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Tasha, before. Those are wonderful words. And I always find it so heartwarming. I remember our old people used to say, the truth only comes out when you're together. not to be done in alcoves by themselves, but when you come together, you're nutsamot, you're one heart, one mind. So thank you for starting us off in a good way. So yes, my name is Morgan Guerin. My ancestral name is secəlenəχw, which comes by way of my great grandmother, who's actually from the Lummi Nation. I was born and raised in Musqueam, so, and I guess they kind of knew I was never going to leave Musqueam, so they put one of my one of the names from further away to here to show those sort of connections far and wide. And it was a way of reminding others of that connection that you and your family have. And as a way for myself to ground myself continually and remind myself that I belong to all these areas. As a member of the Musqueam Nation, which is right at the epicenter of Coast Salish territory, navigating to and from our relatives, of course, always happened by water. So I'm very happy to share a few words about the meaning of that connection to Musqueam people and to Coast Salish people. And I think it's something that I always find the echoes across all of Indigenous country always generally speak the same. My relative before me actually made an amazing point about how you refer to Mother Earth and as she is as a person. And I'll give you a teaching that I've given many times recently because I think it actually helps me and helps others to learn. And it was a teaching my grandmother gave me during a scolding about who you are as a Hwalmukh person. Hwalmukh being the word that we use for an Indigenous person. And it was further opened up to me that when you translate the word from our ancestral language, the Hunkaminam language, which is part of the Coast Salish's Hulkaminam language, one of the dialects, it translates to Hwalmukh is like you and the earth belong to each other. You belong to the earth. Tammo is the earth. Tamath, the paint we put on, blood of the earth, signifying that you come from the earth. And Hwalmukh, you are of the earth. Now, understanding this, it actually came when I was a kid and I saw something on TV of, and it was early land claims sort of conversation, land being taken, land being stolen. And my grandmother scolded me saying that they can't steal it from you. You don't understand, son. You're Hwalmukh, you belong to it. And belong is something that's stronger. Because if you noticed, even though we refer to Indigenous people that way, the actual translation is the way you live your life. It has nothing to do with your race. It's how you live your life. So when you belong to the earth, like a child belongs to their mother, is the way it was told to me. Grandma, can I sell, can you sell me? No, Grandma. She goes, I wish I could sell you. She was mad. Remember, this is a scolding. And she said, you have a responsibility. I look after you and you look after me. And we look after each other. And that's why all of our people have lived the same way forever. And when you look at, the archaeology in the area, and which is almost nothing compared to our oral histories that are given. Yes, we lived the same way since time immemorial. I live in Vancouver. The Musqueam story is much older than where the city of Richmond is. In fact, the city of Richmond coming out of the ocean is part of our story, our living with Mother Earth. So when you belong to each other like that, and that teaching is passed, then you understand that respect. And as my relative was saying before, you don't take more than Mom can give you. You don't name, all of our place names, they aren't referenced after people. You don't call, that's an elbow. It's not St. John's Cross elbow. It's not named after somebody. Mom's body part already has a name. It's an elbow. And it's recognized that with the body comes that tummoth side of it, the blood of, and that's our waters. So when you understand that that's the thing that keeps you living and breathing and moving, the thing that brings life to you, because without mom's blood, there is no life. And that cycle doesn't continue. And this is the grounding teaching that we have here in Coast Salish territory, which then spreads into so much more. Because when being an oral people, we go out onto the land to transfer our knowledge to the next generation. Same as my relative was saying before. Because we're an oral culture, one of the most important aspects of oral teaching is to make sure that you have taken everything that's come from before you, your elders have given you. You've collected it as much. You've repeated it back to them so that they can correct you and say, no, 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 child, it's like this. Or else then you get the telephone game happens where you whisper in one ear and 10,000 years later it means something else. Well, our oral histories are so precise that we have people who live in some areas 6,000 years ago and you say, oh yeah, that was that family over there. And through DNA testing, oh, voila. Oh, it's not a surprise to us, we knew that. So you take this, but there are rules for that oral transition of knowledge. And a big part of it is being out on Mother Earth, to be out on the river. A lot of the things that I talk about today and I share with many others, I learned out on the fishing grounds where I was with my uncles and my dad and my grandpa. And this is the place where this happened, son, and this is why this happened. And then I'd go back and I'd bring the fish back to grandma's house. And then I'd go inside with my grandma and we'd start processing fish. And I'd bring up things that grandpa said out in there and goes, oh yeah. And then they would add some more when they're all around. And then that sparks a conversation. The classroom is now in session. The classroom is the environment. The teachings are the curriculum. And it's very, very hard to pass both those along when you take one away. If you remove yourself from the environment, it's like removing yourself from your mother. Eventually it becomes a distant memory. You'll still have respect for it, but it's not in the same way as you respecting her as she sits there, rather than a memory. So you don't throw things into the river. So you don't do more than she can carry. And when we talk about that traditional passing of knowledge too, it was taught to me that, I mean, I come from Musqueam. This is where the Sparrow decision was won in Canada, was here in Musqueam. Uncle Ron Sparrow was the one who was charged at that time. This is an Indigenous rights case known across Canada and in fact the world. Winning the Aboriginal right to fish, like we needed to win something we've been doing for 15,000 years, putting it into Canadian law. And I was taught immediately, yes, we have a right, but you always had a right. And what's more important than that, son, is the responsibility. Because the time when you stop being responsible, that right doesn't mean anything. And to make sure that our people are at the table discussing. So this is why we come. Indigenous people aren't stakeholders. We're not stakeholders. We are the stewards who have always looked after this place. Like if mom went to the hospital, you consult with us over what we're doing with mom. Those conversations. And that's where consultation was actually born in the Sparrow decision. The Sparrow test is based on consultation. And that is bringing our old laws and trying to marry them into this new system that we have now. And how do we teach the next generation about honoring your mother? Because here's a lecture, and I always say this, I'll speak these words, and in 20 years, you might be able to remember 5% of what I've said. But if we go out there every single day, and we are teaching this constantly with the importance that you have to remember everything I've taught you because you need to pass it to the next generation so they know. and our way of life doesn't end. We haven't assimilated. A lot of people, why don't you write it in a book? I always laugh, how many versions of the Bible you got? That's why we don't write it in a book. Auntie and Grandma will tell us when we're wrong because we've gone outside of the consensus of that knowledge going forward. How do we pass that knowledge along when the classroom's taken away? And if you take the classroom away long enough, then the curriculum starts to slide too, because it's not in motion. So when we talk about these places, that's why it's so important. Not just for what is right and what needs to be done to look after Mom, to look after our Mother Earth, to look after the rivers, the veins of her. But in order to make sure that the next generation moves forward. So those impacts of the residential school don't continue on to the next generation until it actually we've assimilated, or they've just become stories. So very, very happy in the path the Creator's given me too. As I said, over 20 years I worked as an Aboriginal fishery officer working on the river, and I knew that was my path. And I saw it when the decline of the salmon started. When I was a young man, I seen it then. All of us did. Elders said, you start looking after what you've got because it's going to be hard, and this is a lot of the teachings. And that said, it's a matter of, after a while, I moved on to become Musqueam's marine planning specialist. We have 68 major projects that are in construction or going to be in construction in my territory alone, adjacent to the river. 68 major projects. And I found that I could write thousands of tickets as a fishery officer. And what would it? It just means that the Receiver General of Canada has a better budget. Does it really go back into stewardship? And this is where I'm saying, not just for Indigenous people, but all people of Canada to understand and respect what their right and responsibility is. Entitlement is not a word with our people. It isn't. It isn't. That responsibility is key. And I find that the majority of my job is having this conversation with 68 major projects day in and day out. So how do we change the shift in the focus? And I know today I have a lot of like-minded people with me. So how do we get this message out to those who actually need to be reconnected with Mother Earth? Not something that's away, but how do we reconnect you back to Mother Earth so you understand that it's not a matter of whose problem is it? It's understanding that it's all of our responsibility instead.
Yeah, exactly.
So that said, very happy to spend a bit of time with everybody. And yeah, I think I'll end it there and leave it for some questions at the end. So, heights up. Thank you everyone for listening today.
Thank you, Morgan, and thank you. Please join me in thanking Morgan for being here with us this evening. It was really beautifully said, and the way that you describe responsibility, I think that's something that in our society overall, people are disconnected from that responsibility. You know, having responsibility, it sort of extends to our immediate family. You know, I take care of my family takes care of me, but then not thinking of Mother Earth as our life giver, and as you say, the water being the lifeblood of Mother Earth and what gives us life. And from what all the things that we gain, all the things that we benefit from Mother Earth taking care of us, we owe that. It's our responsibility to give back in favor too, and take care of Mother Earth too. And that is that shift in mindset. I'm so happy to be hearing about tonight. That's something that I would like to integrate more in my life. And I hope that everyone here joining us tonight or watching on YouTube are thinking about ways that you can do this too in your lives. Thank you, Morgan. All right, so we have our last, thank you, Morgan. Our final guest speaker of the evening is Marilyn Baptiste, who is the former chief of the Hanigutine First Nation and one of 4 Indigenous conservation leaders of the Conservations Through Reconciliation Partnership. Marilyn grew up hunting and fishing in the Namaya Valley, where her father was chief. learning how to fish with a dip net on the rivers for wild salmon. Responsibility to protect our land, our waters, and our future generations was paramount in Marilyn's education. And so when a mining company was planning to drain Fish Lake, she took action. The community's effort to oppose the mine was successful, thanks in large part to Marilyn. And in 2015, Marilyn was awarded the Goldman Environmental Prize. Thank you, Marilyn, for joining us tonight, and welcome. Please join me in welcoming Marilyn.
Thank you, thank you. And I just want to say, wow, a really huge thank you to Tasha and Morgan. You know, and I'm hoping that my internet is going to be stable enough for me to carry this out with my PowerPoint. But I just want to say thank you to them in the, you know, when you're in these kinds of sessions, and your presentations are very well aligned, as what I heard from both Tasha and Morgan. It's amazing. And you would think that we did some kind of a review beforehand, but no, we didn't. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for being here, and very honored to be with you today. I am going to try and share a PowerPoint, and it is not going to be in line with my words, but just thankful to be a part of this very important initiative. And again, I thank the speakers before me and have learned a lot, and a lot of, it's really important to know and to hear what everyone is doing across Turtle Island, not just Canada, across Turtle Island, as well as around the world, what we're all doing for Mother Earth. I also want to give thanks to the 215 children who did not make it home. No matter how hard it is, we give thanks for the fact that they were found, plus the over 700 children in Saskatchewan, and many more who will be found. This has triggered many people across Turtle Island, as well as around the world. And there will be more. And of course, a lot of this is bringing to light where people are paying attention. They're hearing now. Their heart is in it. Their heart is impacted. And that is very important in all the work that we do for Mother Earth, as you heard the speakers before, so gracefully and authentically speaking to the fact that Mother Earth is our, whoops, sorry, I'm getting carried away here. And okay, like I said, it's not in line with my words. And of course, in giving thanks, this is the fact that we are all taught to observe everything around us. Reciprocity, something that is very difficult to say, and sometimes very difficult to acknowledge or realize what it means. It is about holding up our responsibilities. Respecting ourselves is to respect Mother Earth. And when we take care of ourselves, we are also taking care of Mother Earth, for Mother Earth is able to also take care. For example, giving thanks to Mother Earth and water every day. One of my friends from the Mohawk Territory had shared with us, many of us chiefs from across Canada, every morning when you're making your water, making your coffee, giving thanks to the water that is providing that coffee for you. Giving thanks to the water changes the molecular energy of that water, and it is helping your body. Some of the issues that we face, as you heard Tasha, as well as Morgan, the issues that we face across the world, across Mother Earth, comes from the colonialism and that's all so many impacts to the water. One of the things that, one of those impacts is the olive trees. They were brought to North America from foreign countries. They don't belong here, and they are taking up more waters and groundwaters. They are invasive species. And of course, nowadays we are facing many invasive species, not just in trees, plants and whatnot, as well as there's invasive fish species that are being transported to different areas that are impacting the waters. In California, they are, I mean, they've been dealing with shortages for many generations. And they also have the shrubs, the olive trees, and those things that are brought in to stabilize banks. I learned this from a very good friend, Jennifer Krill, who is with Earthworks. And that brings me to my late dad's teaching about many years ago when I was quite young, and it was hot summers, you know, not as hot as these heat waves, but I wanted to order a tree from a magazine because it was supposed to grow fast and provide all the shade. And my dad said, my late dad said, if I did that, it would impact our waters and our groundwaters. And then later in the years, I learned this firsthand from other people in my travels, in my journeys. And also, I've learned that baby's breath is an invasive species. That was really hard for me. And our bees are impacted. I mean, everything is being impacted. And it comes from this foreign economy of the boom and bust, the rape and pillage, clear the lands for farming and mining. These are all colonial impacts to the lands and waters. And we need to get back to the basics and learn to work with Mother Earth and the seasons as our people had for generations. Impacts of clear-cut logging is one of the things that we were fighting for many years. Trees filter the pollution out of the air. And trees also regulate the groundwaters. And when you come along and you clear cut the lands, as we are experiencing everywhere, it creates floods. For example, you know, our people have always been taught you take only what you need. And we take what our family needs. As Paloma had mentioned, my late dad taught us how to fish on the rivers with a dip net. That is something that I will treasure for all of my life, and I love it because when you're out there and you're dipping on the rivers, it is a part of our way of life. It is a different way, and it's taking only what we need. And then we step aside and allow other families to take what they need. It is a part of our well-being. It's a part of our health and our happiness and being together and just being there out on the land and the waters. And the government's policies and regulations are there for government and industry benefit. As you heard, you know, we're all fighting for our lands and our waters for Mother Earth for many generations forward. And that's all of the regulations are for their interests, not our interests, not the land's interests, not Mother Earth interests. And this again is from the colonialism. Assume jurisdiction over lands, writing their own policies and regulations, the Water Sustainability Act, the Watering Down of the Fisheries Act that we faced when we were fighting for Fish Lake. And this is one of the mass dance. We were dancing in the streets of Vancouver, and it was one of the highlights. You know, I would prefer to be out there drumming and singing rather than in a meeting room fighting with government. And being in the streets of Vancouver and singing and drumming and the mass dance was amazing. And it was another way for us to get our voice out there, for the people to hear what we were fighting for. And it was, there is no right way to do the wrong thing. That was the big part of the message. And we went through 2 panel hearings and we won with scathing reports both times. And we're hoping that it's over, and they say it's over. But one of the big things is we need to keep our voices out there. You as young people, you are powerful. All of the work that you have been doing out there on the waters, cleaning the waters and getting your message out there. I just absolutely love the work that you're doing. Greta Thunberg, she is absolutely inspirational. I love her, as well as Takaya Blaney. She has fought very hard. She's been out there with her songs and her, oh, there's my timer. And so I just want to say, as young people, you're powerful. Observe around you as you have been. Assess what is there, what needs to be done, and continue cleaning up the waters. I'm so thankful for your heart and your dedication. Educate adults, government, and industry as you have been doing. And I think a big part of it is to advocate for change to legislation to protect Mother Earth first and foremost, and then work respectfully with Mother Earth and the seasons. And maybe another time I could possibly share with you a video and curriculum that we have created in the year 2000 on the Taifot documentary of the Indian residential school in our area. And it's simple, small steps, as the other speakers mentioned, even simply giving thanks to the water every day, even if it's only in your heart and your mind until you're ready to share your voice. Love yourself, Mother Earth, and the water, and don't be angry. Don't get mad, get even. I was kidding. Our healers, our elders' teachings guide us to not be angry, but to help one another. And as some people say, KISS, keep it simple, silly. I thank you very much, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Marilyn.
You're welcome.
I am in awe of all the speakers tonight. It's been just such a wonderful session, and thank you everyone for joining us. I just want to bounce on some things you said, Marilyn. I am want to say a really big congratulations. I know this happened a fair number of years ago, but the activism and being able to protect the lake from a big company, and given all of the hurdles with the different acts that were not there to protect you. There are so many stories that we hear of Indigenous communities that are not able to have their voices heard and to protect their land. And so it's so wonderful to hear of these success stories and knowing what we can do when we lend our support for these causes. And then also you mentioned taking only what you need. Again, this is something I think we're disconnected with. It is so easy for us to just go and we think our limit is the amount of money that we have, but that should not be what we are basing our thoughts on, what we are taking. It's so hard to think, okay, what do I want versus what do I need? But a step for me is what I think about is, well, every time I do want something, thinking, well, where did this come from? What are the components that went into making this? And thinking, bring back that connection to Mother Earth of, where these things came from. And when you have to go through that and think step by step, everything that you are consuming, just bringing that awareness to the forefront, bringing that gratitude there, but then that helps you realize, is this something that I actually need, or am I taking too much? So for everyone here tonight, we have some steps, some actions that you can take yourself to help support your journey. There's a lot more than this, but these are some of our suggestions here in terms of educating yourself on truth and reconciliation, giving space for and amplifying Indigenous voices, supporting Indigenous activists like the people here tonight. There's also a little donation ask over here. This is walks that Tasha was talking about. We'll put that link again in the chat if you're able to support. This is a recommendation that Morgan shared, saying this is something he lists, doesn't have to read it. I have read this, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. It is an incredible book and I highly recommend it to everyone. Please add it, if any of you are in book clubs, add it to your book club reading list. As we talked about earlier, using personhood language, saying, oh, check out this, somebody is here right now. Thinking of our water as a she, creating that connection. And in the way that we, in our English language, we use the word it for everything that is not human, but extending personhood to all living beings on Earth. Spending more time with and expressing our gratitude for our local lakes and rivers and all of Mother Nature. I'm going to pop a little survey link in the chat. This webinar is supported by Environment and Climate Change Canada. We would love to report back to them about the success that we've had in delivering these kinds of webinars. We hope that we can receive more grant funding, organize more of these. So answering our survey is a really great way that you can help support. If you're looking for other ways to help support C-SMART, check out our social media, follow, promote us, share what we're doing. We're a small group. We need your support. Sign up for our newsletter, stay in touch with what we're doing. And if you are so moved to, please consider becoming a monthly donor. So I want to thank you all. We're going to follow this up with a Q&A. But if anyone needs to go now, we did say it was ending at 6 p.m. Pacific time. We are 6:01, wonderful, just on time. I want to say thank you to Environment and Climate Change Canada and NADA for supporting our webinar series. So thank you all. If you need to head off, I appreciate you being here tonight with us. But we do have time for Q&A. If you'd like to stay, we will be hearing more from our guest speakers. If you'd have any questions, please pop them in the chat. And Elaine will be putting all of the guest speakers up on our screen so we can see everyone. See, lots of us are saying thank you in the chat. Thank you. Yes, it was, I agree, so enlightening, but also very powerful, very moving. Felt myself coming to tears a couple of times during the talk. I grew up feeling very connected to nature, to Mother Earth, to water. And I feel like that's something that was pushed out of me the more I grew up in society. The way that the language I was speaking shaped me. And I'm so grateful to be on the journey now to reestablishing that connection with Mother Earth. And I hope that this is something that all of us tonight are feeling. We have a question from Bernadine. Taking only what we need does not align with global fishing quotas. How do we balance responsibility and long-term economic growth in fishing communities? Someone like to take that? Morgan, go ahead. Thank you.
I could probably jump in, and I'm happy to have anybody sort of join in with me too. I mean, historically, if we look at Musqueam, was one of the largest trading ports in the world 5,000 years ago. And so when we talk about that, taking only what you need, right? A big part of our culture was actually built on having, people from other territories, if they had a forest fire in their area, would come down and trade for fish, and we'd set up protocols and all these sort of things. So we did have a very much commercial component. In fact, as I've said, when we look at Coast Salish territory, you drop a pin in it and it's Musqueam at the epicenter, right at the mouth of the Fraser. That wasn't by accident. And so all this trade and commodity we were coming over, where our population would boom up into the realm of, according to anthropologists, sociologists, up to 250,000 people in our territory during the summers, coming in, trading, moving, fishing, and then going away. And it moved like that millennia after millennia. The difference is when we start, and the exact point is when we have that cutoff, rather, what you're saying earlier, it's a amount of how much money I have, how much money I need to make, where there has to be a cutoff. And it's only at this juncture that we have now, when we're at beyond crisis level, we're in a catastrophic state for return for salmon going up the Fraser River, that now we're putting in those injunctions of saying, rather than Olympic style fishery where we'll go, and it's fine, there's an abundance, right? Actually taking, well, why is there an abundance? Part of, the chain of these fish life is the amount of fish go up, and that attrition that they lose moving up is a big part of, and the fish that need to, that don't make it up, that go by the wayside and they pass away and they go back into nature, that's part of the chain too. That's how we feed our feeder fish. And that's part of like the little blood cells inside Mother Nature's veins, right? These sort of things. So unfortunately, how we do it today is going to be a very different conversation than how we needed to have done it a long time ago. I know that my great grandfather was actually in the late 1800s addressing the Dominion of Canada, British Canada, saying we're overfishing sturgeon right now. Oh no, they were in abundance. These are 20-foot fish going everywhere, and our voices were silenced. That was about all the platform we had, because of course we weren't allowed to hire lawyers. We're barely allowed. He had to get permission to leave the reserve to address them. These sort of things. So how do we do it now? Stewardship and conservation, we're nowhere near in a place to be even having a conversation of what that commercial thing. And I always say, and Musqueam will be the last one to chase the last fish up the river. That's not going to happen from us. So now we're going to make sure that those fish are getting up the river. And as a cornerstone part of what our culture is, to have to put that away for generations now at this point, in order to make sure that those great-grandchildren have the opportunity. Now we're in this different silo of putting teachings away in a time capsule, us, for 2 or 3 generations, so that when we can go back to fishing, that we can go back into the way and learn from the past as well. So it's going to be a much more, it's going to be a generational approach at this point before that's even a conversation. Globally speaking, you're absolutely right. We cannot sustain this. Our Chinook salmon that are returning now used to be red or white with 1 marble within 350 fish we had return up our stream. We're now having like 250 marbled salmon that are red and white springs moving up. That tells me they're going from krill to herring or whatever they can eat out in that ocean going system. So Mother Earth's blood is thin in nutrients out there in the ocean. So globally speaking, yes, we have a problem. So locally, how do we act? We think locally. We have that responsibility. Globally, how do we act? Lend voice to the ocean as much as humanly possible. As a nation, say, this is enough. Because it takes that and say, yes, this is not only my problem, but for the future generations to come to as well. That's about, it's not the be all end all, but it's definitely your first steps that we need to take.
I would add to Morgan's answer as well, because ultimately if the water is sick, right, like we keep saying that over and over again, like if the water is not sustaining life, it doesn't matter. It's not, if it's poisoned, if it's so toxic, if it's drying up, right? That's the other issue that we're noticing as water walkers and actively looking at, moving across the landscapes. Like we are in a drought in the prairies. Like, and there are indigenous prophecies, there's Indigenous stories telling us to prepare, right? Telling us that there's going to come a time when the water is going to, I mean, we're already there, I think, but the water is only going to become more precious and more of a, unfortunately, more of a resource for some, right? And so, yeah, I think we really need to activate the way that Morgan has described and pressure, right? I mean, we as Indigenous people are doing everything we can in these small pockets, right? But, you know, there's big, huge, multi-million-dollar industries that many of us are up against. And so, you know, put that pressure on. I think that's something that everyone can do, and pay attention. You know, pay attention to what's happening in your local area. Who is knocking on the doors, right? And what industry is interested in your local territories? Pay attention, educate, and then activate.
Thank you, Morgan and Tasha. Marilyn, do you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to add that of course, there's probably not a whole lot that I can add other than the fact that, you know, we are way past the point of no return. And yes, there is a big demand, but because of that boom and bust that I mentioned, that colonial economy, that just doesn't fit. That we need to get back to the basics. We need to bring that back to a simpler process, because our people for many, many years have been screaming about all of the, all of the commercial fisheries licenses on the oceans for years and years. And they have finally, DFO, the assumed government, DFO finally brought in some kind of a crazy program where they allowed themselves to buy off some of those commercial licenses off the oceans. And guess what they did? They placed them in lands on the rivers. So what we did, because we're a part of the spawning grounds, one of the bigger fisheries off of the Fraser tributary is the Choco and Choco Lake. We made sure that we had one of those commercial fishery licenses, so that we could protect those waters. And that is a fight. And, you know, I mean, it's about going back to realistic numbers, processes, and it's the same thing with the waters. I mean, government is regulating waters, and FITFR, it's the first in time, first served. It's like, no, that if that were what it really is, it would be Indigenous first. And no disrespect to anyone, but that is basically where it's at, but government doesn't recognize that. So it's that colonial government and pressuring, as Tasha said, and it is about changing that legislation and those processes. I'll leave it at that so we can move to a couple of the other questions that I've seen there.
Thank you. We have a question from Graham, who's going to unmute themselves.
Hi guys, thank you very much for speaking today. My question is what do you guys think needs to be done to get rid of boil water advisories on Indigenous lands that are across Canada? Because I've learned about it in my Indigenous course I'm taking right now. I'm just curious to see what you guys think about them. Thank you.
I'll go first because mine's really short. I think the Canadian federal government could end the boil water advisories tomorrow if they choose to. They're choosing not to. And I would encourage you to think about the reasons why that might be. Why isn't there any funding? Why do Prime Minister after Prime Minister make those promises, and year after year we have the same number of boil water advisories? And so they could end it tomorrow if they chose to. There's enough funding. They've shown over and over again by directing those funding dollars in various areas, including resource extractive industries. But in my opinion, they're choosing not to. And so I would encourage you to think critically as to why that might be.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just build off of Tasha's comments, absolutely. I mean, when we look at the history of how many of our people were moved to, I mean, in Musqueam, I'm not privy to that, but I have relatives all across Turtle Island as well who absolutely are. And we are such a tight-knit community that I have people that I call relative who are, you know, living in Nunavut or living on the East Coast, you name it. And they tell me the same thing. Our people were moved from these beautiful prime locations and moved into places that are deadlands on purpose. So I have such almost an anger in my soul when it comes to, it was known that drinking water wasn't there. And when we talk about, you know, not just cultural genocide, genocide in general, why won't you bring clean water when you will pipe it many years ago to the neighboring community, which is 10 miles away? These sort of things. It absolutely can be fixed tomorrow. It could be fixed tomorrow, but it's not. So why is that not happening? And I don't have a clear answer for it, but I think it's something that I would like to see all of Canada answer, or have asked to be answered for that reason too as well, because it is the continuation of our genocide, and it's done in such a quiet way. And there's no reason for me to say it in any gentle words, and that's why many of our people say it's still happening today.
I definitely agree fully and totally, because those policies and regulations that Canada assumed they have over Turtle Island, over Canada, those colonial genocidal policies are still there, you know, and if they're not changed, how is anything else going to change? They're talking about they're implementing UNDRIP, but are they really implementing UNDRIP in the way that it was written for the rights of Indigenous peoples around the world? Or how much of it have they changed for their own benefit and industry's benefit? Those are the things that we need to pay attention to, and we need to pressure governments and hold governments and industry accountable. So yes, definitely. And we need to be able to help each other, make our voices louder. And like I say, the young people are amazing. Their voices are so amazing and so powerful, just like our grandmothers, you know, and we bring our grandmothers and our children together. That is very powerful. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure.
No, my pleasure. And that was a very good question. And I'll also lend one more little perspective to that. When we always think of in the prairies back east, all these sort of things. My relatives in Samiamu just got clean water this year, and they didn't do that through negotiation with the federal government. They did that through negotiation with the local municipality of Delta, which is just next door. So they're as the crow flies, you know, 20 miles away from me, not even that. And they had to have negotiation for a city service agreement in order to get off their boil water advisory for the first time in history. These are in the Lower Mainland area, First Nations. So this isn't something that is somewhere else. This is happening too today, and right in our backyard.
And the other thing too, I mean, as Indigenous people, we have always stood in the way, right? Historically, we have always stood in the way of resource extraction, and we've always protected our lands and waters. And the way, I mean, when you think colonialism isn't a thing of the past, right? There's still an active, deliberative energy force coming from industry and from the government as well, to ensure that we don't come together. I mean, if you have a community that is, you know, got clean drinking water, and that is rooted in their culture, language, traditions, and you know, if you take away the basic necessities of life, people are going to be too busy trying to survive versus, you know, versus kind of standing up, right? And so I think from my observations that there is a deliberate there's a deliberate nature to that as well, as far as I'm concerned, because again, if there wasn't, it would be fixed. If those were non-Indigenous towns, there would be action. And you know, it goes back, and people are like, it goes to every issue. If there were 1,000 non-Indigenous children found on reserves in the last, you know, couple months, all those people on those reserves would be under lock and key already, right? So you have to understand that colonialism is still very much an active force. And as long as we keep standing up, as long as we keep, and we will, there's no doubt about it, like we're able to tap into the energy of the lands and waters themselves. And so we'll always be here. We're never going to go away. we will be here 7 generations from now.
Some call it activism, we call it Thursday.
Thank you all. I think we have time for just one more question. This comes from Taylor. What are some tips for an environmental nonprofit to incorporate, honor, and partner with local Indigenous peoples?
Very simply, from my perspective, working with many in my region, and please jump in to my relatives as well, meaningful dialogue with the nation, okay? Incorporate, not just accommodate, incorporate, and not appropriate. So if you want to have that conversation with local First Nations, and I think that it's not just a want anymore. I think this is something everyone needs to be doing in this day and age and era. If we're talking about truth and reconciliation in a meaningful way, as everybody touts, in a meaningful way, have that conversation, and go to the nation as well. You know, this isn't just about one person speaking on behalf of the nation. Ask the nation, right? What would you like to see? How can we lend your voice? There are many nonprofits that come in meaning well, but they take a byline that's off of one of our web pages in the area, and then they attach it. But no consultation was done. So then when I was talking about that knowledge transfer, that context is lost. Oh, you're right, but you're wrong. Because when it comes to this part of the river, and then because we have that very microscopic view of how to look after mother in those areas, instead of making it a 30,000 foot, there are things that are just going to change. So make sure you have those conversations with your local nation, and make sure that you incorporate those in a meaningful way together, not something you've appropriated and put into your sort of tagline. So I think those, and many say that this is a daunting task. It really isn't. It really isn't. But also remember the capacity crunch that our nations are under as well. You can't expect a phone call and say, oh, we're going to be there Tuesday. I work on 68 major projects in our territory. I will definitely give you my time whenever I can. But there are other 68 people who don't want to listen to us right now that I have to talk to first. So it doesn't mean that we don't want to be there, but we are struggling at capacity issues right now. It's one of those things of, fine, we have to consult, now we consult. And then we're the ones who are stuck going, hang on a second. There's a second part to this. There is a capacity that we not only need to build internally, but you need to understand and respect, because we didn't put ourselves in this position. So I think that's it. Go to the nations, start that dialogue, and then just make sure that you are very patient with it too as well. So you might be moving at the speed of business, but we're moving at the speed of what Mother Earth needs. So, and those two things really don't coincide very well. So.
I would add, from a grassroots perspective as well, know which culture you're dealing with. You know, we are very different. So, you know, what works on the West Coast might not work in Plains Cree territory. So it really is, the onus is on you to find out whose territory you're situated in. What cultural group are you trying to work with? And above all, always give their voice primacy. Never speak for somebody else who's Indigenous. We've run into that problem time and time again. And always just ask. If you're unsure, ask. With our water walks, we just finished a water walk in Sudbury, Ontario. We walked for Junction Creek, and we had partnered with the Junction Creek Stewardship Committee. And so it was a really beautiful melding of Indigenous and non-Indigenous scientific methods, knowledge sharing, resource sharing, you know, and there's room for that. With the Sask River Water Walk, we just had a reach out from the Global Waters Institute or the Global Institute for Water. I don't even know, but they just reached out. It's a university affiliated with the University of Saskatchewan, Global Institute for Water Security. And they were like, what do you need? And so, you know, when someone comes to you and they ask, like, what do you need? I was like, wow, like, give me a few days, I have a list, right? But, you know, when you come with that good heart and that good intention, you know, most people some learning curves as well. And so educate yourself even before you approach that group. But I would say most of us are looking for allies in a good way. Yeah, thank you. I'm all big around in the water, but I am on the highway. So.
Awesome. And I just want to say also, of course, ditto. And it's really important, definitely, to, of course, you know, introduce yourselves to the communities wherever you are, or, you know, like the Quack Youth on the West Coast here, they are going to be carrying out an event on July 11th. And they are thanking the fisheries minister, Bernadette Jordan, for taking fish farms out of their waters in their territory. But they are also asking and urging her to take out all of the fish farms out of the Pacific, because they are impacting our wild salmon. And that is one very important step. And in that, you know, introducing yourselves, getting to know the communities, working with our communities. And it is really important, of course, many times what we've come up against is different, either different kind of organizations or people trying to come to our individuals in our communities. And that's not the way to work with our people. But as mentioned, you know, come introduce yourselves to our communities and our nations, and work with us and become those allies so that we can help Mother Earth and the future generations. Let's do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn, Tasha, and Morgan. That concludes our Q&A session for this evening. I would like to acknowledge there were a few questions in the chat that we're not getting to. I'll read them out. I'm so appreciative, Tasha. Thank you for adding some comments there, answers for those people. Mikhail was asking, is there any way to access more Indigenous authors for research purposes from a non-colonialism perspective? Any favorites to share? And Tasha shared the Helen Cara Decolonizing Methods, or reading list. So Marilyn and Morgan, if you do have any suggestions, if you want to type that for Mikhail in the chat. Kristen was asking about how we would talk to young children about the future of our waterways and how they can be involved in being better stewards for our environment. I know there were a few teachers on the call tonight, so that's a really good question there, you know, for educators to be, or parents to be educating their children. Tasha suggested educating children through Indigenous lenses, and suggested one of these books called The Water Walker by Joanne Robertson, and taking a look at your local water keepers where you are guests for some resources. There was also globalgoals.org that was suggested by a participant, and naturalcuriosity.ca. So lastly, I'd like to conclude again with just a huge thank you. I feel so much gratitude to Marilyn, Tasha, and Morgan. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for everything leading up to this webinar too, for your time and for teaching us. It's just been so beautiful and moving, and I'm so grateful that for everyone being here tonight for your learnings, and I hope you will take this in and teach others. And definitely at C-SMART, this is what we do. We go out and we educate children, and this is something we want to be incorporating ourselves, integrating these Indigenous perspectives in our lives, in our teachings, so that, as you said, Morgan, it's the next generation. That is where we want to see that change, and we want this to happen from a young age, that shift and that mindset, and growing up with you know, coming from a good place. So thank you again for joining us, and have a good evening, everyone. And please check out all the links. We'll send out the webinar link tomorrow and the surveys, and please continue learning and educating. Thank you.
And I just also wanted to say to any of the educators, take your children out on the land. They'll teach you more than you can imagine. They are amazing. And that's where they learn, and that's where they remember. That's where I remember from my dad, from my mom, from my elders, you know, that's where it's at. So thank you all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been
And Morgan and
pleasure.
Tasha, I would like to meet you one day.
Oh, anytime, doors always open, like Grandpa said. Yeah. Yeah. That said, like same teaching. I want to thank everybody for their time today too. It's Grandma and Grandpa said the greatest honor you can have is when somebody comes into your home as a guest with an open heart and an open mind. And I really want to raise my hands to each and every one for taking their time to listen today too. So, thank you to you all.